Hello, this is Fiona Cuthbertson with another episode of So You Want To. And today we're tackling one of the most important realities of modern work, how to thrive in multi-generational teams. From baby boomers to Generation Z and the emerging Gen Alpha entering the workforce, we are now routinely having 4 or soon 5 generations working side by side. But whilst this can bring a range of experience, perspective and skills, there are also risks of friction on issues such as values, technology, work styles, and expectations. So, how can we embrace the diversity and make sure that all workers feel valued? Well, today we're joined by Paul Goulden to answer this question. Having spent years being a leader in the ageing sector, he's now set up Ageing Untapped, which is designed to help businesses unlock the benefits of demographic changes we're seeing in the UK and internationally. His practical, evidence based approach helps leaders bridge generational gaps, foster psychological safety, and build teams where people of all ages can thrive. And today he's going to impart that wisdom to us. So welcome, Paul.
Good morning, Fiona. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much. So first of all, what assumptions are made about colleagues who are significantly older?
So I think the first thing we need to address is this old assumption that about our life course. So the whole idea of born, learn, work, retire, die is no longer actually how we're living our lives. A rapidly changing society means we're going to have to learn across our entire life course to support our working lives. And retirement isn't going to be a cliff edge. It's going to have to be a more flexible and a more mixed model of work and employment. I mention this because I think the old way of viewing our life course is at the root of some of these assumptions about older workers. But key assumptions about older workers in particular are that they are less adaptable, less interested in learning new skills, and this whole idea that maybe they just want to coast into retirement. Now, this may be true for some older workers, but I think you could equally argue that some workers of all ages are just interested in taking home the money and not developing in their jobs. So I think it's wrong to put that specific label on older workers like that. I'll give you a real life example. I'm a member of an organisation called Brave Starts. Brave Starts supports people in their 50s and over with career changes, starting their own business and getting back into the workplace. And all of the people I've met through Brave Starts, over 50s into their 60s and 70s, they are highly motivated with huge experience and they have a willingness to want to carry on working and learning. I think one of the other things that we should nail very early on as well is this issue of tech and older workers. So we've been using computers in business since the 1950s. We've been using personal computers since the 80s. You've had equipment like electronic tills, which have been around for just as long. So any worker who's in their 60s is likely to have had to use some form of technology in their working life, largely because they won't have been able to avoid it. So I don't think the key is about knowledge and skills. It's about that willing to learn that is the issue. I think some of the assumptions we would like to make older workers is about that vast life experience, the want to give that experience back. And there is also evidence that older workers are more likely to actually work better in organisations that align to their own values, which will obviously help them put more effort into their roles.
You talk about the age-related biases regarding older people. So how does this manifest themselves practically?
So I think it tends to be more subtle than deliberate, with older employees maybe getting overlooked from promotions or excluded from development programs, or assumed that actually they can't work on innovation or that they don't want that challenging work. Recruitment language such as digital native can unintentionally discourage experienced applicants. But then again, I think you can say the same for younger applicants too. And there's many stories of people in their 20s in that catch-22 situation of they're not working, so they're not gaining experience, but the jobs that are available say that experience is a requirement. So I think it's not an overt positive thing or negative thing that actually people are recruiting to specific age groups. I think the language that we use is probably at the root of a lot of this bias.
And what about organisational barriers? So do they currently prevent mature workers from performing at their higher level?
For an older worker, that might not mean being promoted to a partner or given a fancy title. It may actually mean a more flexible approach where their skills and experience are still valued, but their actual role changes in accordance with what's going on with their life at the moment. So perhaps it might seem like a demotion to the outside world, but if the employer is happier and more productive and the company still achieves its aims, then frankly, who cares? I think there's also some industry-specific barriers that are rapidly becoming complete nonsense to an aging workforce. So, for example, some limited liability partnerships, and let's look specifically at accountancy and law firms, they have articles and governing documents that mean that their staff and partners have to retire at certain ages like 65. That's just complete madness. I mean, there are workarounds, but These organizational barriers are increasingly looking outdated, and those companies are increasingly going to be missing out from the experience that those older workers are bringing.
And how can hiring and performance reviews minimize unconscious age bias?
I know people in their 50s who've been rejected for roles because they were told by the employer that they were overqualified. Now, this is, again, madness. And anyone over 50 that goes for a job and gets told that they haven't got it because they're overqualified should call that company out, because that company clearly doesn't know how to recruit properly. And the reason I say this is because if you're rejecting someone as overqualified, this person will have looked at the job description, they will have looked at the salary and made a conscious decision to go for it. So if you are then rejecting that person and saying they're overqualified, what you're actually saying is that you don't want all of that experience, all of that skills, all of those contacts that person is actually going to be bringing to you for free. So again, I think companies need to look at their hiring policies, and they also need to just have a think about the people who are applying and maybe some of the backstories behind that.
Do you think it might be an excuse that people say that people are overqualified if they're older?
I suspect it might very well be used as an excuse, but to be honest with you, if you are recruiting and you have to use excuses to tell applicants they haven't got the job, then maybe you're not being true to yourself and your own organization as a recruiter. So I think regardless if it's used as an excuse or an age bias, it does paint a picture about how that organizational company does their recruiting.
And what does an age-inclusive workplace actually look like?
So I think it's probably easier to talk about what it feels like rather than what it looks like. So there's going to be some positive energy. I think it'll feel dynamic. It will be focused on the teams and the company goals. It may be tense, but it'll be creatively tense, but quite respectful and ultimately fun. The best thing about it, if you've got a high-performing team, people are going to want to join it or stay in it. And I think that's going to be the key thing to say that you've actually achieved it in practice.
Absolutely. You talk about the fact that people actually want to stay in the team. Surely it is actually a testament to the businesses that can keep older employees there, that actually they are offering something beyond other organizations that essentially have a higher turnover of staff.
I think that's true. I mean, there's plenty of evidence about intergenerational teams. So there was a report by Vantage Aging in 2020 that gives reasons why an age diverse workforce is going to improve your company. They say it improves performance, it reduces employee turnover, it drives innovation because you've got those different skills, those different experiences, and those different creative ideas to actually drive that innovation. The range of skill sets is important. You need to recruit to the skill set rather than to an age band. And in any team, that range of skills is going to be vital. I think the other interesting thing is, depending on who you're actually marketing to, you need to have an age diverse team, because you may be actually marketing to different segments of age bands. There are various stories of marketing agencies who are marketing products for people in their 60s and 70s, and then all of the team members are in their 20s and 30s. Well, I'd maybe call that out and say, if you want to market successfully to a specific age band, then you need to have at least that sort of like for like experience within your teams to inform the decisions there.
And how does a workplace support its older workers?
I think this needs to be part of a wider HR strategy. So the issue of someone in their 50s having to look after elderly parents and someone in their, say, 30s having to look after children. Yes, it's a different form of caring, but actually the importance of those caring responsibilities to how that person works can be viewed as similar. So I think it needs to be an appreciation by the employer about that life course and the issues that are going on. A good leader will actually balance that very nicely with appreciating those other responsibilities that are outside of the workplace.
Absolutely. And as you say, as people live longer, everybody has more responsibilities. You can actually be the sandwich generation. So you can be looking after young children and also older parents as well. And all of this can kind of make people more vulnerable, and then they feel psychologically phased out if they are not feeling appreciated in the workforce. So how can you build that psychological safety within the workforce in order to help people feel secure?
Leaders and companies need to have this ladder approach where they want to support workers to do the best job that they can. They want to support their learning, they want to support their development and their contribution back to the organization. But as well as that, there's the safety net as well. If you want to progress, if you want to do a really good job, you'll have all of the tools that we can possibly give you. But on the other hand, if things aren't going particularly well, then the door is open to talk about that as well. So that's to actually support a worker to both do their best and feel secure and stable in their role.
So how can you ensure that everyone works together to improve team performance and innovation?
I think this is going to come down to leadership. There are reverse mentoring schemes, shared learning, and we've talked about putting mixed age teams together. So, for example, when I was working at the International Longevity Centre UK, there was a period when we had team members that were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now, I mean, that's a huge age range. And what it actually meant was there was so much energy. There was a lot of creativity. Yes, it was tense and there were some quite heated debates and discussions. But in essence, because we were all focused on what the organization was trying to achieve, the intergenerational differences, if you like, was put aside in terms of looking at who could bring what and how all that creativity could be brought in. And actually, we could produce something really special off the back of it.
So you've mentioned already reasons why an age-diverse place is important, like improving your performance and reduced turnover, driving innovation, skill set. But what happens if it all goes wrong?
The early warning signs, I would say, is if you've got a team that is quiet and sullen. I think if you've got throwaway comments about boomers or woke or whatever, any good leader is going to have to take the temperature of the team. So it is about a leader putting a team together or leading with their own values and making it quite clear this is a collaborative unit, this is a learning unit. We are all going in the same direction, making everyone know what role they are playing and how they're contributing to getting there.
And do you think it is made more difficult now with the fact that people are working remotely as opposed to necessarily in an office altogether?
Possibly, because I think the whole water cooler idea of people nattering, while they're making the coffee or doing whatever. And I think certainly when I started back working again after COVID, I really enjoyed being in the office because it's what you don't get with Zoom and Teams meetings is that sort of how was your weekend? What were you doing? And that sort of extra social stuff that happens outside of the transactional stuff to do with the role. So I think it has made a difference. Then people are more willing, and I think more companies are encouraging person to person and actually attending the office now, which I think can only be a good thing.
So, how could performance expectations and success matrix be designed for intergenerational teams, understanding that there might be different needs and wants?
I think one of the things I would look at there is how you share objectives across a team. So you've got a team of 5 or 6 people, all with different roles within a team or a small organizational company, just making sure that everybody knows what their objectives are and where those objectives fit in to meet the overall strategic direction. So say I'm in my 50s, say I'm working with someone in their 30s, I'm going to do A, B, and C in the next 3 months. Other person, 30-year-old, is going to do D, E, and F in the next 3 months. If we both know that and we can both appreciate what the other person is doing and we can support them in that and know that actually if we get all this put together in the right way, we as an organization or a team are going to be successful, then you're starting to get to the point where we all appreciate each other. And I think it also reduces maybe some of that jealousy and unknown quantity about what people are up to. So I think that sharing of performance expectations and knowing what other team members are doing and how your work fits in with theirs and theirs fits in with you and how that all comes together to achieve where we're going, that I think that's the key bit for me.
Absolutely. Maybe that's more important because at the end of the day, as you say, everybody has their own path to lead, but it's all about achieving that mutual objective regarding what's actually going on in the business. And then it's just personalizing what the benefits are for the person depending on where they're at. And if you were going to advise businesses to make one change in order to help intergenerational teams work better together, what would it be?
So I would say get hold of your staff data and have a really deep dive into what's going on. So look at the age profiles, look at how long people have been working for them, look across those age bands, look at data like training records and absence records, and then that'll give a real picture of the workforce. And then you map that against the strategic needs of the organization. But I think there also needs to be a bit of work done. This is the snapshot of where we are now. Bear in mind that both workforce and probably the markets that you are and the people you're trying to sell products to or services to, they are going to change rapidly in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think looking at the internal workforce data, looking at demographic shifts in society, and then trying to plug the two together, that's the sort of activity that is going to future-proof an organisation. It's going to bring lower staff turnover, more knowledge, better innovation, and ultimately a better bottom line.
So what about the statement, companies that ignore workforce demographics are never going to thrive?
I wouldn't say they're never going to thrive, but they're never going to realise their full potential. If you've got a company that accepts demographic change and societal change, looks at where we are now and over the next 10 to 15 years down the road, any company that does a really good piece of work on that and they can future-proof their organisation, they are the companies and the organisations that are going to stand out. Those who don't get it or get it but don't do anything about it are going to fall behind. They're absolutely going to fall behind. The demographic shifts we've seen in the last 50 to 60 years are far more accelerated than we've ever seen. And those changes are going to still accelerate, and they are still going to throw things up into society, into the workforce, that we can only sort of conjecture at the moment. If you ignore it, you're going to lose out to those who actually grab hold of it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Paul. In a world that often focuses on what divides us, today's discussion has shown what's possible when we lean into age diversity as a strength rather than a barrier. The most successful workplaces of the future won't just tolerate generational differences, they'll celebrate and leverage them for better results and better lives. So thank you to Paul again for coming onto the show. Thank you to the viewers who've hopefully enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed making it. If you have any questions regarding the podcast today, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. As I always say, more the merrier. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Hope you have a good week, one and all.